Order. Okay, I see Chong, Cooper, and Ellis, and Berthold, and Khalid. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 107.
Welcome to meeting number 107 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics.
It's taking place in hybrid format. Pursuant to standing orders, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Pursuant to Standing Order 1064, the committee is meeting at the request of 4 members of the committee to discuss a request to undertake a study on the topic of documents in relation to the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg, tabled in the House on Wednesday, February 28th. Just want to remind all members that are here to make sure that the earpieces are not near the microphone because it does cause potential feedback and potential injury to the interpreters. Another reminder too is that all comments are to be directed through the chair. Now, when I dropped the gavel, I saw Mr. Chong, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Ellis, Mr. Berthold, and then Ms. Khalid came up. So I'm going to start.
I'm so very sorry, Chair. I thought that I had requested that I be second after, and I have given notice. I had my hand up. I would really appreciate that, Chair.
Sorry, Ms. Khalid, but the meeting hadn't started. I didn't hear your comments because I was talking to the analysts.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Mr. Housefather, on your point of order.
Yeah, Ms. Khalid clearly spoke before anybody else had their hand up, Mr. Chair. You convened this meeting at a time without consulting anybody else on the committee. And to be honest, I thought that was exceptionally unfair of you. And
Mr. Housefather
clearly demonstrated her request to speak before any of the other people had their hands up.
The gavel had not dropped, Mr. Housefather.
But you were aware that she asked, Mr. Chair.
I was talking to the analyst at the time, Mr. Housefather, and I can assure you that this meeting has been convened in accordance with the standing orders and the rules of the House of Commons. So I am going to start with Mr. Chong. I'm going to keep the list, and Ms. Khalid, you will go when you're recognized on the floor. Mr. Chong, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to move a motion, and then I will speak to the motion. So I will begin by presenting my motion.
That in light of the February 28th, 2024 tabling of the Winnipeg lab documents, which contained the government's own findings, concluding that the People's Republic of China and its entities infiltrated Canada's top microbiology lab, a national security breach representing a very serious and credible threat to Canada. And given that access to this information had been denied to Parliament and all Canadians by the government for several years, the committee undertake a study pursuant to Standing Orders 108, 3, H, 6, and 7 of the collection and transmission of information and intelligence within the Government of Canada and the government's reliance on its overclassification to deny access to it by Parliament and Canadians, provided that the committee report its findings to the House and call the following witnesses to appear. A, the Departmental Security Officer, Executive Director of Security, Public Health Agency of Canada, the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Stephen Lucas, the Vice President, Infectious Diseases Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Donald Shepard, the Vice President, National Microbiology Laboratory Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Guillaume Poliquin, the President of the Public Health Agency of Canada, Heather Jeffrey, the Minister of Health, the Honourable Mark Holland, the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, David Vigneault, the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, Nathalie Drouin, and the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc. Mr. Chair, I'd like to give a brief couple of minutes of remarks on this motion so that all members...
Thank you, Mr. Chong. Before you go ahead, the motion is in order, and my understanding is that the clerk has shared the motion in both official languages with all members of the committee. Go ahead with your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple minutes of remarks so that all members will have a say on this motion and we can get it to a vote in the time that we have. We finally, Mr. Chair, have the documents. In our view, this is the start of this matter, not the end. We are continuing off where we left 3 years ago when the Canada-China Committee asked for the Winnipeg lab documents. And I believe that this committee has to conduct this work because the government has indicated, and Minister Holland specifically, that no one within PIAC is going to be held accountable and terminated for these lapses at the Winnipeg lab. So I believe Parliament has a job to hold the government accountable. This is a grave and serious matter that requires a parliamentary to investigate. Dr. Chu clandestinely collaborated with the government and the military of the People's Republic of China and was paid by that same government and military of the People's Republic of China without the government of Canada knowing. These Winnipeg lab breaches are part of a broader pattern by this government of neglecting Canada's national security. We not only have the Winnipeg lab breaches, we have a neglect of sensitive areas of research at Canadian universities, in the theft of intellectual property and the threat to national security that CSIS has now highlighted for almost a decade. We have the neglect of the PRC's foreign interference threat activities directed at democratic institutions like Parliament and at our democratic processes like our general elections, which has forced the government to call a public inquiry, which is ongoing. And in all of this, it's the Prime Minister, the head of government, that is responsible. There is a document, a PCO document, titled Open and Accountable Government. It is one of the founding documents of this current government. In that document, it is clear that the Prime Minister alone is responsible for the machinery of government, that the Prime Minister alone is responsible for how information and intelligence flows within the different entities of the Government of Canada, flows from services like the Canadian Security Intelligence Service to various departments and agencies of the government. That same document also makes it clear that the Prime Minister has a unique responsibility for national security. And so when we combine those two things together, we have a responsibility as parliamentarians to get to the bottom of this, because ultimately the Prime Minister is accountable to Parliament, as is the Ministry. And so the motion that is in front of us today is a substantive motion that is focused on examining two things that are within the mandate of the committee. First, the purpose of the motion in front of us is to examine the flow of information and intelligence within the Government of Canada, to examine why this information and intelligence did not catch the clandestine activities of Dr. Chu before September 2018, when it was discovered that Dr. Chu had improperly registered a patent produced from work as a government scientist in the People's Republic of China. To discover why Dr. Chu had not been discovered in the 2 previous years, in 2017 and 18, of having clandestinely met with entities within the People's Republic of China and clandestinely received payments from the government and the military of the People's Republic of China for that travel. The purpose of the motion in respect of examining the flow of intelligence within the Government of Canada is to also examine why it took 10 months for the government to secure the lab when it had been discovered that a patent had been improperly registered in the PRC and government policy violated. The patent violation was discovered in September of 2018, yet it took 10 months till July 5th of 2019 for the government to secure the lab. Despite the fact that in the early part of 2019, when Dr. Chu's computer was seized by government IT, and despite the fact that Dr. Chu in the early part of 2019 was denied approval for a trip to the PRC, she was still allowed to ship lethal Ebola and Henipah viruses on March 31st of 2019 from the Winnipeg National Microbiology Laboratory to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We need to understand why information didn't flow more quickly to prevent that from happening. The second substantive examination that the motion proposes is to examine why the documents originally requested in 2021 were overclassified. Minister Holland has indicated in the House of Commons that the classification of the documents was PIAC's responsibility alone. And so we need to understand why officials at the Public Health Agency of Canada incorrectly classified these documents and denied a parliamentary committee this information. And that's why, Mr. Chair, all of the witnesses, with the exception of two witnesses, exception of three witnesses, I should say, are witnesses that are from PIAC. That is why we're asking for the Departmental Security Officer to appear. It was that position that originally flagged the violation of government policy in the registration of a patent in the People's Republic of China. It's why we're calling other officials from PIAC to understand what broke down in transmitting information that a parliamentary committee had ordered 4 times to Parliament and its committees. I'll finish, Mr. Chair, by saying this. I really, truly believe that we have a job to do as parliamentarians in this committee to hold the government accountable. The government defied 4 orders of the House of Commons and its committee for these documents. We called the president of the Public Health Agency in front of Canada to condemn him for this defiance of this order and for refusing to hand over the documents. The government subsequently took the Speaker of the House of Commons to court and subsequently called an early election, which had the effect of dissolving the 4 orders. And after 3 long years, we finally have gotten access to the documents, and we need to continue this examination in order to hold the government accountable. We cannot let this defiance of Parliament that took place 3 years ago go unanswered and unexamined, and we cannot allow these national security breaches to go to continue. And that's why it's so important, I think, this committee adopts this motion, examines this matter, and I hope produces a report with recommendations to improve the government's performance in these matters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chong, Mr. Cooper on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I speak in support of the motion, and let me say at the outset that this national security breach is about as serious as it gets. A national security breach that occurred at Canada's highest security lab that is responsible for handling and studying some of the most dangerous pathogens and viruses. For 3 years, this Prime Minister has been anything but transparent. Instead of informing Canadians about this massive national security breach that took place under his watch, he covered it up. In an unprecedented campaign of obstruction, the Prime Minister defied 4 orders of Parliament, and for the first time in Canadian history, he took the Speaker of the House of Commons to court to block the documents, 600 pages of documents that have finally been produced to this committee, and he called a snap election in an effort to avoid producing those documents, an election that, incidentally, the Beijing regime interfered on his behalf to the benefit of the Liberal Party. So now, after 3 years of cover-up and obstruction, we finally have the documents. And what is evident upon reviewing these documents is that there was a massive breakdown with respect to the flow of intelligence and information within the Government of Canada. And that is one of the central matters for which this motion seeks to get to the bottom of. To underscore the degree to which there was a breakdown with respect to information and intelligence, the head of special pathogens, scientist one of 2, who is a central figure in collaborating with the Beijing regime, by the time a preliminary investigation was launched in the fall of 2018, that scientist Dr. Chu had traveled to the PRC on at least 5 occasions, had collaborated with PRC officials, including officials within the People's Liberation Army. Among those Dr. Chu collaborated with was none other than Beijing's foremost expert in biodefense and bioterrorism. Bioterrorism. And Dr. Chu had been paid for her travels to Beijing, all apparently unknown to PHAC. An investigation finally gets launched in September of 2018, but Dr. Chu continues to work in the lab until July 5th of 2019, 10 months later. During that 10-month window, Dr. Chu continued to have unfettered access to the lab. By March of 2019, a report had been issued in which PHAC had determined that Dr. Chu had been actively collaborating with the Beijing regime, with the PLA, clandestinely, without the knowledge of PHAC, that she had shipped antibodies to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And yet, while PHAC knew that, Dr. Chu was the central figure in facilitating the transfer of Ebola to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, one of the most dangerous and most deadly viruses in the world. How did that happen? How was that allowed to take place? This breakdown in national security has had serious consequences. In fact, CSIS and PHAC have determined that this breach represents a very serious and credible danger to the Government of Canada as a whole, and that it constitutes a credible threat to Canada's economic security. Now, Mr. Chair, as Mr. Chong noted, the Prime Minister is singularly responsible for the machinery of government with special responsibilities for national security. The buck stops with the Prime Minister. And part of the questions that we need answers to is, when did the Prime Minister know about this massive national security breach? Did he learn about it in 2019, or did he learn about it in January of 2021? We don't know, or sometime in between. Let me conclude by saying very simply that the national security culture of the Government of Canada starts at the top. It starts with the Prime Minister, who has special responsibilities when it comes to national security. This Prime Minister set the tone for the national security culture when he said, famously, that he admires Beijing's basic dictatorship. In other words, he admires a brutal, authoritarian, genocidal regime. And we have seen over the past 8 years of Justin Trudeau interference on the part of Beijing in our post-secondary institutions, interference in our elections, interference in the targeting of sitting members of Parliament, interference in terms of setting up illegal police stations, and the intimidation of Chinese Canadians. And now we have learned that Beijing was given unfettered access to some of Canada's most sensitive biological secrets. After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, Canada's national security culture is broken, and an incident on the scale of what happened in Winnipeg is a direct result of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Pour la prochaine intervention est pour M. Ellis.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Ellis, followed by Mr. Berthold, and then Ms. Kalig and Mr. Villemur.
Good morning, colleagues. It's a very significant day in Canadian history, perhaps the most significant security breach in the history of Canada. And as the Canadian CSIS would say, this is a serious and credible threat to Canada and to Canada's economy. And why is that, Mr. Chair? When we look at many things involved in this terrible sequence of events, let's be clear for Canadians to understand that this is the only containment level 4 lab in Canada. It is not like we expect the Prime Minister, as my colleague Mr. Cooper has outlined, who's responsible for national security, to have to look after 20 such labs. There is only one level 4 containment lab in Canada. Secondly, what we know the result of this terrible breach happened is that now China has a level 4 containment lab as well, albeit with what appears to be sloppy workmanship, but by the hand of scientists who were working here at the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. Why is this important? Well, Chair, when you look at documents from the U.S. State Department as early as 2005, they identified the Academy of Military Medical Sciences as a threat having links to a biological weapons program. And when we begin to understand this, why is the Academy of Military Medical Sciences important? Because scientists from that particular academy were able to gain access, as my colleague said, in an unfettered fashion and an unsupervised fashion to the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. Once again, we need to understand that the Academy of Military Medical Sciences is the scientific arm of the People's Liberation Army, which is partly tasked with biology-enabled weapons. Biology-enabled weapons, bioterrorism. Further to that, Chair, as we said, we know very easily that a PLA scientist had access not just to the lab and to do scientific work and create papers in conjunction with Dr. Chu, but also in photos wearing a PLA uniform with, again, terrible and astonishing contacts with a major general of the PLA also, who wrote papers with Dr. Chu. Understanding all of these things really points to the fact that there is a serious and credible threat to the democracy here in Canada and to our economy and to our safety as well. Finally, Chair, to sum up, I would also say that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control states that Ebola is a Category A bioterrorism weapon. We know in March, on March 31st, 2019, that Ebola was sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology at the behest first in October, 18th of October 2018, of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, supervised by Dr. Chu here in Canada. Oddly enough, on the 19th of October 2018, Dr. Chu made a visit to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. One of many visits, at least 5 visits in 2017, 2018, of which Dr. Chu was not entirely open with respect to the Public Health Agency of Canada, knowing that Dr. Chu was visiting the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and of course they actually paid for her trip as well. So is this a serious and credible threat to Canada? Yes, it is. Were there significant security breaches at Canada's only Level 4 laboratory? Yes. Is the Prime Minister of Canada singularly and uniquely responsible for the national security of Canada? The answer to that is yes. We need to get to the bottom of this scandal, Chair, and that is exactly why I tend to support this motion, as we have an opportunity and an obligation to hold this government to account as the official opposition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Monsieur Berthold, sur la motion, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Berthold, on the motion. Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, given the importance of the issue before the committee today, I'm going to read for all those francophones in the country who are listening to us the motion that we have before us so that they fully understand why we're here today and how important it is to look into this issue after so many years. And so, Chair, the motion reads as follows, that in light of the February 28, 2024 tabling of the Winnipeg Lab documents which contained the government's own findings concluding that the People's Republic of China and its entities infiltrated Canada's top microbiology lab, a national security breach representing a very serious and credible threat to Canada, and given that access to this information had been denied to Parliament and all Canadians by the government for several years, the committee undertake a study pursuant to Standing Orders 108.3H 6 and 7 of the collection and transmission of information and intelligence within the Government of Canada and the government's reliance on its overclassification to deny access to it by Parliament and Canadians, provided that the committee report its findings to the House and call the following witnesses to appear. A, the Departmental Security Officer, Executive Director of Security Public Health Agency of Canada. B, the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Stephen Lucas. C, the Vice President, Infectious Diseases Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Donald Shepard. D, the Vice President and National Microbiology Laboratory Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Guillaume Poliquin. E, the President of the Public Health Agency of Canada, Heather Jeffrey. F, the Minister of Health, the Honourable Mark Holland. G, the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, David Vigneault. H, the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, Nathalie G. Drouin. And I, the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honourable Dominique Leblanc. So that is the motion before us today, and I hope that members of all parties, given how important this issue is, will vote to adopt this motion today so that we can move to shed light on the issue before us. What is the issue before us? Well, there are two scandals here at play. The first is that everything that happened in terms of information leaks and breaches to the benefit of the PRC from the National Laboratory are extremely important. And second, there is the issue of the cover-up. This government avoided making public these documents. Those documents were finally made public last week, and now we have had an opportunity to see what was involved. The government tried to avoid this at 4 levels of Parliament when it came to producing these documents. This government decided to avoid or deny, rather, these documents. And the Prime Minister is the one who is ultimately responsible for national security within our parliamentary system. And this Prime Minister in 2021 decided to trigger quick elections in order to avoid its government having to follow any orders from Parliament. So here we have these two scandals before us, and because of this, it's important to shed all possible light on what led to these breaches in the laboratory and what ultimately led to this cover-up on the part of the Liberal government. So now we finally have the documents. So now we can begin figuring out what happened. 3 years ago, the Canada-China Committee had requested the documents from the Winnipeg lab. And it's up to the committee to do this work because the government will not do it. Why do we know that? Well, because the Minister of Health himself, Minister Holland, declared that he wouldn't hold anyone responsible, would not punish anyone for these breaches at the lab. Why? Well, we don't know why. So our role as a committee is very clear. We need to consider this very serious issue, this issue of the collaboration of Dr. Chiu, who clandestinely worked with the PLA and the PRC, and who was paid by that government and the PLA without the Government of Canada being aware of this. Now, the Winnipeg, this is part of a broader trend, which is that this national government has been neglecting security. So there are the Winnipeg lab issues. There's the issue of sensitive research taking place in Canadian universities, and the government neglected to make this a safe and secure process. We also have the issue of the PRC interfering in elections. And we know that this led to an independent public inquiry that is currently ongoing, or investigation rather. So we have all these scandals, all these issues occurring of foreign interference in the country, and unfortunately the Prime Minister was nowhere to be seen, despite the fact that there's a document from this government that's called an open and accountable government. So despite the existence of this document, where the Prime Minister acknowledges that he is ultimately responsible for the security of this country, he is also at the top of this government. He is responsible for any information that is flowing from this government to institutions and back and forth. So, Mr. Chair, today we have this motion before us, and the purpose of it is to consider the flow of information between this government and institutions, and to find out why before 2018 this issue was not raised, when a red flag had already been raised about this at the time. What happened? Well, Dr. Chiu went to the PRC at least 5 times over 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. And during those trips, she did unauthorized visits and was paid by the Army and the government of China to do this, to undertake these trips. The purpose of the motion is to understand why it took 10 months. Just imagine 10 months for the government, after these red flags were raised, to figure out how these breaches were happening. In September 2018, Dr. Chiu registered a patent. It still took 10 months to secure the lab once it was discovered by the RCMP. That's unacceptable. Now, the purpose of this motion is also to examine why the documents that were originally requested in 2021 were overclassified. What does overclassified mean? Well, it means that they were given, they were assigned a security code that meant that the government wasn't able to read them, that Parliament wasn't able to read them. And the minister has said that it was PHAC's fault that the documents were overclassified. And that is why, in our motion, we call for officials from the Public Health Agency of Canada to appear. We have to. This is our role. This is our responsibility. We have to hold the government accountable. The government, I will remind you all, defied 4 orders of the House, took the Speaker to court, and called an early election in order to avoid the public and Parliament having access to these documents. So all those who believe in the search for truth and who believe in the values of national security, whether they be Conservatives, members of the Bloc, the NDP, or even the Liberals, all those should vote in favor of this motion for the good of our national security and for a search for truth. Thank you, Mr. Berthold. The next on the list is Ms. Kalig, followed by Mr. Villemur. Ms. Kalig, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your indulgence and for the privilege of being able to speak in this committee on this very, very important issue. First and foremost, I just want to start by thanking, as many members would know, I served on the ad hoc committee for Winnipeg Labs. And I want to thank MP Renee Villemure, Heather McPherson, and John Williamson, all from different parties. The four of us worked very tirelessly to go through these documents and to ensure that we were actually being able to be open and transparent. It was a great process. And this committee, this ad hoc committee, was something that this Liberal government put into place. And it was difficult to get it going because the Conservatives dragged their feet for so long. And when we got through this months and months of work that we did collectively, nonpartisan way, to really find out and to understand what happened here, I think that we came to a good conclusion, and I really want to congratulate my three other colleagues on that really, really good work. Now, this ad hoc committee, we had proposed this ad hoc committee of parliamentarians to balance that parliamentary accountability while protecting national security. And Chair and colleagues, as you may know, I've sat on National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. I know how important it is for us to balance that relationship of accountability while also protecting our national security. And as my four Conservative colleagues, none of whom are permanent members of this committee, if I may add, have all alluded to, that there was apparently some kind of cover-up. There was no cover-up. There was no cover-up, Chair. We are supportive of taking the unprecedented step of creating these ad hoc committee, going through the documents, of having arbiters, and then releasing documents. This has been a nonpartisan process. And this is all about the public interest, and all parliamentarians from all parties came together to make sure that we got there. The second point I want to raise, Chair, is that the redactions that are done by PHAC, which is the Public Health Agency of Canada, and CSIS, they're not done by politicians. And it should stay that way. There's very good reasons why politicians should not be involved in determining what should be redacted on the basis of national security. And I think that the role of this ad hoc committee proved how important it is for us to have that oversight, that accountability, but not to be part of that redaction process. The ad hoc process was an opportunity for Parliament to really weigh in on how these redactions happened, and in this instance, what was redacted, without endangering national security or privacy. And this is a process that I think my colleagues, including Mr. Villemure, would agree with, that works. The third point I want to raise, Chair, on this motion and on this emergency meeting is that we share the outrage on foreign interference. We know that this is an issue, this is a challenge that we have to address, and we can't let partisan politics get into the middle of it. We have to come together as a parliament to ensure that we are protecting Canadians, that we are protecting ourselves in the work that we do to hold government to account, for sure, to make sure that our democratic institutions are stable, are well established, and are protected from a lot of this. Foreign interference is an attack against democracy. And every member in this House of Commons, and we share that concern, Chair, and we have to be united in ensuring that we're working to combat foreign interference for the sake of our democracy and for the sake of Canadians who live here day by day by day. And it is unacceptable that there were two Canadian citizens who were eminent and well-known scientists in Canada that lied to the Public Health Agency of Canada about their work in China. And this is currently an RCMP investigation into these individuals. And I hope that we trust and respect the RCMP to conduct that investigation while we conduct our role as parliamentarians in the general oversight in that process. This motion, Chair, that has been brought to this committee, this is not our committee's mandate. And I'm sure Mr. Vermeer and myself, we have worked really hard on the ad hoc committee for this Winnipeg Labs issue to ensure that Canadians had access to that document. We released those letters, all of those documents. We put out a letter putting in our position. We had arbiters that came in and overlooked the work that we did also. This was an amazing way of showing how nonpartisan politics can work to protect the safety and security of Canadians while also ensuring parliamentary accountability and oversight into the work that we do. Now, Chair, I have to say, this 1064 meeting calling process is supposed to be reserved for emergencies and not for political games. You know, the original letter that we've received on this 1064 really claims that, and again, it spreads disinformation in my opinion, that, that it was the Trudeau government that withheld all of these documents, that there's something nefarious going on here, that there's a scandal going on here. But the reality of the matter is, Chair, that we have worked very hard with all parties to ensure that there is accountability. We know, and I think that all members of this party, and I will again have to say that every single Conservative member who signed this 1064 letter has been substituted out by another member. They are not here in this room. So clearly, this is not the emergency that these permanent members signed off on. They're not here. Clearly, they don't care when we have all of these people substituted in for what is the mandate and the expectation of what the Ethics Committee is. The events that are in these documents, while they're incredibly important, and our government's taken action by creating this ad hoc committee, by releasing those documents publicly, does not constitute an emergency of what transpired 5 years ago. Many actions have been taken over these 5 years to ensure that these issues have been dealt with and that they won't happen again. That's literally the purpose of how we are going to get to ensuring that there's accountability and fairness in process. The ad hoc committee, which again I was a part of, we did important work over the course of many, many months to get to the bottom of this. This 1064 is not necessary. It's not urgent. It is not in the mandate of this ethics committee. And Chair, for that reason, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Point of order.
Mr. Chair, I request a recorded vote on this. Thank you.
That's fine,
Point.
Mr. Chong.
Point of order.
It's
Point
not,
of order, Mr. Chair.
On a
If
point
I
of
just-
order,
yeah.
it's not debatable what Ms. Khalid just,
I just want clarification to the effect of what Ms. Khalid has moved is to shut down debate.
That's-
I'm so
that's
sorry,
debate.
Chair,
That's
but
debate.
no, I refuse
that's
to
debate,
let
that's debate, Mr.
this 1064
Miss-
to become political gander for
Ms.
my
Khalid,
wonderful
I've already
Conservative
addressed that with
colleagues.
Mr. Cooper, and
Thank
and for those who are watching at home, this is a dilatory motion to stop the meeting before a decision is rendered. So I am going to ask the clerk. It is non-debatable. Mr. Chong has asked for recorded division, and I'm going to ask the clerk.
Sorry, Chair, it sounds like you're debating a little bit there on.
No, I'm explaining.
on the-
I'm explaining, Ms. Khalid.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay? I'm explaining exactly what's going on here, and that there is no further debate, that you've asked that this meeting be adjourned without a decision of the committee being made. I'm explaining.
Because this is not the mandate of the committee, Chair.
That's your opinion. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
The vote is on the motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Ms. Damoff,
Yes.
Mr. Sorbar,
Yes, please.
Mr. Hausvater,
Yes.
Ms. Khalid,
Yes.
Mr. Cooper,
No?
Mr. Chong,
No.
Mr. Ellis,
No.
Monsieur Villemur,
Je suis contre.
Mr. Green,
Je vote pour la motion.
yeas 6, nays 4.
So the motion to adjourn does carry by Ms. Khalid. This meeting is now adjourned.